Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Eva again from Debug Squad. In the last video, I mentioned that Babel is a transpiler. So what exactly is a transpiler? How is the compilation process like? Why and what does each stage do? That's what I'm going to tell you next. So what is the differences between compilers and transpilers? Here comes the definition of compilation. To convert from one programming language to another mainly refers to high-level programming language to low-level programming languages. So high-level programming language, there are more language features that are used to describe logic such as branching, looping, function, object-oriented, etc., which are closer to humans, allowing developers to express various logic theories quickly through it, such as C++ and JavaScript. While low-level programming language, they are designed to operate and handle the entire hardware and instruction set architecture of a computer directly. It requires developers to understand the operating principle of the computer and execution details, such as assembly language and machine language. So normally, compilers refers to the conversion from high-level language to low-level language, while a transpiler refers to the conversion from high-level language to high-level language. And Babel is a JavaScript transpiler. So next, I will talk about the compilation process of Babel. Babel is a source-to-source transpiler. This means that if you give Babel some JavaScript code, Babel modifies the code and generates the new code back out. The process is divided into 3 stages: parse, transform, and generate. Parse stage is where you convert the source code to AST. Transform stage is where you traverse the AST and use the plugin. Generate stage is where you generate the new code and create a source map. So I will show you a diagram of the compilation process for better understanding here. So you can see the first stage is the parse stage, where you convert the source code to AST. And the transform stage is where you traverse the AST and use the various transform plugin to add, remove, modify the AST. And this is by far the most complex part of Babel or any compiler, and also where the plugin operates. And the last stage is the generate stage. It takes the final AST and turns it back into a string of code and also creating a source map. So have you ever wondered why it's Babel's compilation process divided into 3 stages? So this source code can be recognized by humans but not the computer. If you want the computer to recognize it, you must save different data through different objects and organize them based on how they relate to each other. This data structure is called an AST. The reason why is it called an AST is that some non-specific delimiters such as semicolon, open-close curly bracket are omitted from the data structure. And with AST, the computer can understand the meaning of the source code string. Then you can move on to conversion. So the first stage of compilation is always to pass the source code into AST. After converting to AST, you can modify the code through AST. This stage will traverse the AST and make various additions, deletions, and modifications. This stage is also the core part of Babel. The converted AST is the code that meets the requirements, and it can be converted back to a string. In this process, some delimiters that were deleted before are added back. So let me briefly summarize this part for you. In order for the computer to understand the code, it is necessary to pass the source string first and generates an AST, add, delete, and modify the AST, and then turn it back into a string of code. So now you got an idea of why is it divided into 3 stages. We will now talk about what do these 3 stages do. So I'm going to talk about these 3 stages in details here. So stage 1, pass. The purpose is to convert a string of code into an AST that the machine can understand. And there are 2 phases of parsing in Babel: lexical analysis and syntactic analysis. For example, a source code such as let name equals to Eva, we must first divide it into words or tokens, which is let name equals to Eva in the white box. And this process is called lexical analysis. Syntactic analysis will take a stream of tokens and turn it into an AST representation. Using the information in the tokens, this phase will reformat them into an AST, which represents the structure of the code in a way that makes it easier to work with. So this is for the first stage. And stage 2, transform. The transform stage takes an AST and traverses through it, adding, removing, and updating node as it goes along. The corresponding register visitor functions will be called. In the visitor function, the AST node can be added, removed, and modified, and the new AST node will be returned. This is by far the most complex part of Babel or any compiler, and where the plugin operates. The last stage, generate. The code generation stage takes the final AST and turns it back into a string of code, also creating the source map. Strings with different structures correspond to different ASTs. For example, if statement can be generated as if test code, while statement can be generated as while test code, and function declaration can be generated as function test code. And code generation is pretty simple. You traverse through the AST depth first, building a string that represents the transformed code. Okay, so that would be all for chapter 2. And the most important part is there are 3 stages to the compilation process. So you have learned that Babel is a JavaScript transpiler and there are 3 stages to this compilation process: parse, transform, and generate, and also what each stage does. So this chapter gives you a better understanding of the overall process, and which is the basic for the subsequent in-depth study of Babel, which will be talked about in the later chapters. So that's all for chapter 2, and thank you guys for watching. See you guys in my next video on AST in Babel. Cheers! Oh, and don't forget to comment in the box below, or you can contact us directly at supertripled41@gmail.com. Make sure you click on the subscribe button and stay tuned for chapter 3 of AST in Babel.